Palace and missed it. Robbie is exactly the same age, and he started riding a motorcycle when he was 6 years old. I started riding a motorcycle when I was 16 years old, and I went to Caesar's Palace with 10 years of experience at riding a motorcycle. He's going there with 20. 20 years of experience. This has been a dream of his for a long time. Robbie left me in 1980 and went with other promoters, signed more contracts than Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis put together, got himself into a lot of trouble with promoters, made very little money, jumped every weekend. And he left me because I wouldn't let him jump more than 10 vehicles while he was performing with me. I was afraid that he would be hurt. And I didn't want him to go through what I've gone through. So he just took off. And I had some real run-ins with him when I found out what some of these promoters were having him do. And in fact, I went to Kansas City and tried to stop a jump there in the stadium and to bring a restraining order against it. And Robbie and we didn't even talk to each other for 2 or 3 years. And finally he came to me and he said, "Dad," he said, "I want to go around the world and jump. I know that you can do some promotions for me where I could make as much money in one jump or 2 years I could every weekend, risking my life. And I need your help, and I'd like you to help me." So he signed a contract with the Nevada Corporation, and I agreed, since I am concerned about his life, that I would go ahead and be a consultant to the corporation.
I want to take a look, before we look at Robbie in action, at Gary Wells' horrible accident back in 1980.
He tried this in 1980.
When you look at this, though, and you narrate this for us, what's really going to be fundamentally different from the way it was in 1980 and the way it is in 1989?
Well, when Wells jumped the fountains, there was some new additions built in the parking lot at Caesars, like this wall that he hits here. Oof. But there's a pillar there now that they put up right in the middle of it that Robbie's going to have to negotiate.
So it's going to be a tougher jump?
Much tougher. The jump that Robbie's going to make, he'll jump further than Wells did. And also, he has to miss that pillar and the wall and go into that underground parking garage.
When he went into that collision with that wall, you said that doctors said that his heart was ripped away from his aorta?
He had a real serious internal injury. And I don't think he's ever performed since. Robbie is a much better motorcycle rider than Wells ever was, and 10 times better than I was. Robbie wants to jump the fountains with no hands. He goes through the air like a ski jumper.
Yeah, we have some tape of Robbie we're going to take a look at.
He really does.
Are you confident, realistically, a very confident man right now for your son?
No, not at all.
You're not?
I feel this way. I think he could do the jump if everything comes together and it's he's mentally right and his positive mental attitude is right and he's really ready to go. Let me tell you the problem with the Caesar's Palace thing, the way it's set up. The fountains are right in front of you, and you cannot make a practice run at the fountains. Like when Robbie did this jump in Houston, they made 4 or 5 passes at each other before he actually did this. But you can see when he lands, he jumped completely over that landing ramp about 50 feet and lit flat. And yet he can hang on to it, where other motorcycle riders may not be able to.
With Evel Knievel, whose son, Robbie, will attempt to do what he couldn't do back in 1967, jump the fountains at Caesar's Palace, a 90-minute sports spectacular that's coming up next Friday, pay-per-view. Evel is our guest in studio. We're talking about that death-defying stunt. You, of course, after your fall in '67, went on to do hundreds, maybe even thousands of other stunts, including an attempt at Wembley Stadium to jump the buses. We have the tape of that. Have you ever analyzed why, even after terrible accidents, you get up and do it again?
Well, I was just able to. That was something that was within me that I didn't put there. God put it there. I always lived by a creed that you can fall many times in life, but you're never a failure until you refuse to get up. And I got up many times after accidents, and that one there was a tough accident. That motorcycle got on top of me and burned me, and that's a Harley-Davidson 750 XR, that motorcycle. And I came back to the United States after that jump and jumped 14 buses at Kings Island in Cincinnati, and that's really when I stopped.
Then, of course, later, the ill-fated attempt at Snake River.
Well, that was before that. That was in,
okay, it was right before that then. Okay, but either way, it was still an incredible risk. You were in a rocket-powered cycle, basically a rocket, that you were going to try to jump the canyon. And
everybody, you know, people said, well, that, you know, he didn't make it across, and the parachute came out, and that was a rip-off, and this and that and the other thing. And, you know, I'll tell you something. I'm so lucky that I didn't die in that jump. I was into a 35-knot headwind. It blew me right back across the canyon into the rocks after I'd made it across.
You'd never do it again.
The parachute blew right out on the launch pad from an electrical malfunction, and we had a problem with it. And the first two went in the river, but I ran out of vehicles. But all I can tell you is, if I'd have died, they'd have said, well, that's supposed to be what happens to daredevils. And if I'd have made it across, they'd have said, well, anybody could do that. But, you know, when you get in one of those things, if you really realize the people that are knowledgeable and have any sense at all, we burnt 3 astronauts to death at Cape Canaveral, Gus Grissom and 2 other astronauts. We just lost 5 in the Challenger mission. Anybody that thinks that that jump was easy is crazy, and I'll tell you something. God has not moved that canyon 1 inch since 1974, and I don't see any big, long line of daredevils standing up there wanting to take a shot at it.
We got a minute left. If something happens to your son, and God forbid anything should happen, even if a twisted ankle, would you in any way feel guilty for this attempt?
No, I've come to grips with this with Robbie. I will tell you this, the anxiety and the fear is a lot greater for me than it was when I did it myself. But none of us can tell a human being in which direction to go. And Robbie's 26 years old. I have fought with him and fought with him over the years about what I thought he should do about putting on a beautiful show around the country and calling it Wonderful World of Wheels or whatever, to where he wouldn't have to take a risk. But Robbie wants to do this, and I think that we all feel that have got into this thing together that he's going to be a success at it because he's the best in the world. And I think he will prove that Caesar's Palace is not only the most beautiful hotel in the world, it's also the luckiest gambling casino in the world. You watch him.
This is the ultimate gamble coming up next Friday night. As we said before, not just this jump, but 90 minutes of other stunts. The Knievel'S will be there, and this will be part of a pay-per-view telecast. One other thing I do want to mention before we leave, and that is that Evel is a big proponent of wearing the helmet at all costs. Gary Busey be damned. He was lucky to get away with his life and should be wearing the helmets as so many others, thousands of others who think they can get away with not wearing the helmet when they were on the cycle. I know that's real important to you. Thanks, Evel. Great seeing you again, and best of luck next Friday.
Okay, Roy. Thank you.
Let's see now. WrestleMania 5 reportedly earned Hulk Hogan between $10 and $15 million for a single day's work. The biggest TV rating in years featured Geraldo Rivera's failed attempt to find anything of substance in Al Capone's vaults. Was Barnum right? Is the public suckered in for the sting every time? Well, there's more than a shell game at stake next Friday, more than a few body slams in a wrestling ring. When Robbie Knievel takes off in his motorcycle next Friday night, he says to avenge his father's accident, there's more than just justice at risk. Back in '67, when Evel Knievel failed in his attempt to jump the fountains at Caesars, he was lucky to have just ended up in a coma. That's right, lucky. And when his parachute opened prematurely after liftoff at Snake River, sending his rocket-powered cycle plummeting down a mountain and into the river, well, he was lucky again. Lucky his rocket didn't explode. Lucky he didn't drown in that river. So now, another generation of evil keeps the tradition alive. For $15 next Friday night, you can watch an attempt in a pay-per-view telecast. Some will watch this event in a way that one might slow down to check out the carnage in a freeway accident. And some will no doubt be thrill-seekers with the best of intentions and the best of hopes for Robbie's attempts. But mostly, this is more than a little troubling. Wasn't Gary Wells' accident in 1980 enough evidence to the public and to the Knievel'S that certain thrills should not be sought? The answer apparently is no, but as long as the consumer is willing to plunk down the $15, somebody, somewhere is going to be willing to take a plunk or 2 or 10 in the hopes that they can be lucky again. So let's hope that Robbie Knievel is lucky. Let's hope that this event ends uneventfully, that any ghoulish curiosity does go unrewarded, and that we can go back to watching the Hulkster upend the Macho Man or Geraldo come up empty again. Cheap thrills? I don't know. At $15 a pop, there's nothing cheap about any of it, but you can't put a price on what's really at stake.